The Pharisees with, and the fact that he was under the influence of Satan when he was working his miracles. Anybody remember that, reading that portion of Scripture? Not familiar? We studied it for a long time here, about 6 months ago. No one's found it yet?
The one where Mary and the...
Christ is in a house. He's preaching and or eating. The apostles were also having trouble eating. And if you know anything about Jewish custom and even Italian, when I would visit my grandparents, they were, my grandparents, my grandmothers especially, and my mom, every time I would visit, it would be, "Are you hungry? Did you eat?" Food was a incredibly important item. And another thing that caused Mary to be concerned that her son was in error was the fact that the apostles were having trouble eating, because people were always crowding around wherever Christ went. They wanted to hear him preach. They wanted to be where he was, and they would get food prepared and they couldn't eat it. They couldn't take away from the ministry. The time didn't allow them sometimes to eat. Like, I know there's a lot of large pastors out there. They always are given the main table to eat at our feasts when we eat as a church. And Christ did not take those places. He didn't eat first. Sometimes he didn't eat at all. And Mary mistook that activity also as the fact that he was mentally ill. He wasn't taking care of himself. He wasn't eating enough. She thought things about him, generic motherly things, and did not take a accurate spiritual approach to her son. Did you find it yet? Anybody find that in the Gospels where it talks about that?
Is it Mark 3:20 or 21?
What's it say?
Then Jesus, I'm starting at Mark 3:20. Then Jesus entered a house, and again a crowd gathered, so that he and his disciples were not even able to eat. When his family heard about this, they went to take charge for him, and they said he is out of his mind.
Yes. This is 20 years after the incident in the temple with Christ. Mary has still not settled down, and when she was praised for being his mother, Christ said, rather, blessed are those who have accepted him. Blessed are those who hear the word of the gospel and accept it. They were praising his mother. Blessed is the womb that bore you and the breast that fed you. And Christ was always in that struggle to come out. And what happens is the demons maintain those views. This is where they position themselves inside of us. And you get this kind of longevity in Mary. She hid those things in her heart that Christ did. She pondered them, the word said, in her heart. But she never fully comprehended who Jesus really was. she could not be in sync with him spiritually. She struggled a lot. Mary struggled a lot. And this is one incident when this occurred. And then if you look at verse 22, Mark 3:22, somebody want to read that?
And the teachers of the law who came down from Jerusalem said, "He is possessed by Beelzebul, the prince of demons. He is driving out demons."
Right. What were the church, the religious church officials charging him of?
Witchcraft?
They were the religious. Yeah, they were they were charging him of being under the authority of demons, of the prince of demons, who was assigning demons to cause Christ to do things. They charged him with that, which was actually their problem. It was actually them who had the problem. Let's look at another portion of Scripture. Somebody find where Christ was preaching and the townsfolk grabbed him and began to escort him to the brow of a hill in the town where he was at, and they were going to throw him over the edge of the hill. Do you remember that portion of Scripture? Anybody know where that is? See, these things that Christ was doing here in Mark, while you're looking for that, I just want to let you know these things that Christ was doing, these people were measuring things. They were looking at Christ with these sensibilities still intact. They were measuring Christ by where he was at, what he was doing, what he was eating, when he went into church. They were so concerned about all these corporeal things that were happening, and he was spiritually this whole other person, a whole nother creature. But they had trouble seeing that creature. And what we're going to see in this next portion of Scripture, how that fits. We're just going to spend a few minutes. We'll just spend 10 minutes, and I just want to help you into where we're going here. I guess we're not going to make it here today, but this will be next week will be the third week that I tried to do that, but it seems we're missing a foundation here. Anybody find that portion of Scripture?
Luke 4.
Luke chapter 4.
I guess verse 28. He was preaching in the synagogue in Nazareth.
Luke 4:28. Let's all go there. There are many settings where Christ is preaching in the synagogues in the Word, and there are many different responses to his preaching. One time he gets praise, another time something like this event, this day happens. Somebody want to read 28 and through 30, just 3 verses. It's there is a lot of information packed in that portion of Scripture. It's when you get a chance later, read 24 through 27 because that input will help you to understand how 28 came to be. But somebody read 28, 29, and 30.
All the people in the synagogue were furious when they heard this. They got up, drove him out of town, and took him to the brow of a hill on which the town was built, in order to throw him off the cliff. But he walked right through the crowd and went on his way.
What does this teach us about what Christ's intent was, what he was bearing out in the people? What was going on? What's the supernatural thing that occurred here?
He was able to walk through the crowd.
Yeah, he walked right through the crowd. How? Why? How did that happen? What changed from the synagogue setting to that moment? What changed in the story? What would have been an opportunity for demonic activity? What was the sign of demonic activity that led to this moment? And how did it change? How did the event so dramatically collapse? It came apart completely. What they intended, what they were moved to do, the fact that they were their conscience was pricked so bad, they just wanted to put an end to the source of it. Christ's preaching drove them to such conviction that they wanted to just shut the conviction off, destroy it. How does that activity pair up with what demons' goal is? Do you see it? There is a lot of demonic activity going on all the time, involved in our churches, in preaching, in our daily lives. There is a tremendous amount that we need to be paying attention to. Teachings that come from it, things that we believe and follow in our lives. Today we're seeing that there is a lot of opportunity for them, and if you'll notice, they don't get blamed in anything we read today for any of it. They don't get blamed at all. They're not being seen at all. And so it's very unfortunate that this can happen. But the thing of it is if you go down to verse 30, how did this supernatural event in verse 30 happen? What occurred? The people wanted to kill Christ. Why? What enabled them to have a target to end this bad feeling, these charges against them?
Because they had their traditions and their customs, and they lost sight of what the traditions and customs were for. And Jesus would come in with true scripture to back up his claims and say, no, this is the reason why we do it. So pretty much everything the Pharisees did, he pretty much stuck his thumb in it and twisted it. And he's like, that isn't how God intended it to be. This is God's true doing this practice. This is why you bake the bread and leave it out. This is why you circumcise your boys when they're 8 days old. And he had the reasoning behind it in the true biblical scripture or Torah scripture. And they didn't like being told that they've been doing it wrong for probably centuries.
Okay.
As I go on
So,
my little
so what were they listening to then when their ire got up? What were they actually listening to?
False teachings.
Well, it was coming from Christ. The teaching was coming from Christ. Christ was manifesting to them as truth. Christ was manifesting to them as truth. And when he did that, they rejected him. When he spoke eloquently and they enjoyed hearing him, they'd gather around and, Christ said at one point, this scripture is fulfilled in your presence. He read from Elijah one day, and they were all excited. They said, this is incredible. How can such, a common man, the son of Mary and Joseph, somebody from Nazareth, how can such beautiful, oratory come from, such a simple person? And so here, Christ, when he told them more truth that demons have worked incessantly to keep them in a trap of belief, a lie of their condition, and what his value was, they became enraged when the true Christ appeared. But what is the difference then that happened in verse 30? What was Christ not doing in verse 30? You cannot only read Scripture for what it says. You have to read for all the other things that are not happening in that verse, that tell you about those other things. What was Christ not doing in 30 that caused his what he was able to do?
He wasn't trying to reason with them.
Well, yes. In verse 28, they had a handle. They can grab the truth of God. 1 John 1 through 3 says, we saw God. We touched him. He came into our world. We were with him. He came out of invisibility. He became visible. And they could grab him. He became a handle to them. And then in verse 30, when he was not preaching, when he was not revealing who he was, what happened? What did he become?
Invisible.
The average guy walking through the crowd, no big deal. Who's that? I don't know. Doesn't matter. I don't hear anything in my conscience from that person. He became like everybody else, and he could simply walk away. You guys understand that? You see what's going on? This is what demons do. This is how they work. As long as you keep your mouth shut, as long as you follow the traditions and you behave and you do not cause them problems and get them kicked out of their homes, you are invisible. They don't care. The religious will not care. That's how it works. This is a whole nother phase we're entering into, identifying demonic activity. Write these verses down, go and look, and try to see demonic activity in action. Their goals, their apprehensions, the things they work for, the things they are successful in. They are definitely among us. They're here. They are very busy. They're not the creaky sound the door makes next door. They're not sounds at the sanitarium. They are not a dark room. They don't care at all about any of that. They are here to pervert the message. That's how you will see them. When we speak out, I believe it's Luke 12:12. We've looked at that before. Does that sound familiar? Where is it? When, verse 11 and 12 of Luke 12, when you are brought before synagogues, what have you given to those people? You gave them the handle, the same handle Christ gave.